slide is to discuss the responses to climate change. There are two main policy responses to climate change: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation addresses the root causes by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, while adaptation seeks to lower the risks posed by the consequences of climatic changes. Both approaches will be necessary because even if emissions are dramatically decreased in the next decade, adaptation will still be needed to deal with the global changes that have already been set in motion. Humans have been adapting to their environments throughout history by developing practices, cultures, and livelihoods suited to local conditions. From the Mediterranean siesta to Vietnamese practice of building homes on stilts to protect against monsoonal rains. However, climate change raises the possibility that existing societies will experience climatic shifts in temperature, storm frequency, flooding, and other factors that previous experience has not prepared them for. Adaptation measures may be planned in advance or put in place spontaneously in response to a local pressure. They include large-scale infrastructure changes such as building defenses to protect against sea level rise or improving the quality of road services to withstand hotter temperatures, as well as behavioral shifts such as individuals using less water, farmers planting different crops, and more households and businesses buying flood insurance. The session discusses the different approaches of adaptation. Adaptation is defined by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change as the process of adjustment to actual or expected climate and its effects. Decisions and actions that help to prepare for the adverse consequences of climate change as well as to take advantage of the opportunities are known to climate change adaptation. Adaptation can happen at any level in the society, from the individual up to the national and international levels. In general, the higher up one goes, the more adaptation responses tend to be policies that frame action at lower levels. The ability to adapt is known as adaptative capacity. Adaptative capacity is defined by the IPCC as the ability of systems, institutions, humans, and other organisms to adjust to potential damage, to take advantage of opportunities, or to respond to the consequences. The two types of adaptation are discussed. They are the anticipatory or proactive adaptation that takes place before the impacts of climate change are observed, and on the other hand, the reactive adaptation is undertaken in response to an effect of climate change that has already been experienced. The session further dwells upon the fact that adaptation is not a magic bullet. Climate change may happen so quickly or be so severe that adaptation becomes impossible. Either there are no strategies to address the risk, or they become too expensive that the consequences of adaptation are considered unacceptable. In this case, the climate change has reached a threshold limit or to adaptation. Limits may be ecological, physical, economic, technological, or societal. The session emphasizes that the linkages between adaptation and mitigation must be realized with associated co-benefits. Adaptation should not be undertaken in isolation, but with an eye to any co-benefits for mitigation, sustainability, and in developing countries looking at the development. Co-benefits are the positive effects that the policy or a measure aimed at one objective might have on the other objectives. Adaptation depends greatly on adaptative capacity or adaptability of an affected its system, region or community to cope with the impacts and risks of climate change. The adaptative capacity of communities is determined by their socio-economic characteristics. Enhancement of adaptive capacity represents a practical means of coping with changes and uncertainties in climate, including variability and extremes. In this way, enhancement of adaptive capacity reduces vulnerability and promotes sustainable development. Adaptation to climate change has the potential to substantially reduce many of the adverse impacts of climate change and enhance beneficial impacts, though neither would cause nor without leaving residual damage. The discussion then furthers to the question whether we really want to have balance in nature and if we really want to stop global warming in the coming years, if we actually want to stop the Himalayan glaciers from melting down. Well, if the answer is yes, then we have to start relooking at our lifestyles. We better begin our way of responding to the whole notion of development. Our ecological footprint depends on our lifestyles. It depends on how much water and energy we use and whether or not we acquire large quantities of unnecessary commodities. For example, a lot of consumption of styrofoam would lead to a larger footprint compared to someone who consumes things made up of paper or cloth. The session discusses the Earth Charter, which sets the preamble of realizing our basic needs and adopt lifestyles that emphasizes upon quality of life. The session further dwells upon ecological footprint. The simplest way to define ecological footprint would be to call it the impact of human activities measured in terms of the area of biologically productive land and water required to produce the goods consumed and to assimilate the wastes generated. More simply, it is the amount of the environment necessary to produce the goods and services necessary to support a particular lifestyle. The session also elaborates upon the calculation of water footprint. Besides calculating water footprint of commodities such as coffee, black chocolate, tea and the like. The session further builds upon a more practical perspective of discussing the lifestyle changes through the platform of enumerating my contributions in which different segments such as methods to control waste generation through the 5 R's are discussed. My contribution further cruises to the energy and transportation sectors. It discusses the concept of adoption of green building, sensible use of electrical appliances, maximizing dependence on natural resources and the like. Some of the star examples of adaptation such as the temple town of Tirupati with the world's largest solar steam cooking facility and many more such examples are discussed. Finally, the session concluded with the calculation of my footprint to assess how sustainable is the present lifestyle and accordingly what adaptations are to be made for a sustainable planet. Happy living!